Street circuits, road circuits, ovals, some big, some small, some surrounded by deserts, some by thick woodland, some by farmland, some by high-rise buildings, some by the sea. Formula One has had them all. And each in their own way, they've made their own impact and legacy, and given millions of people around the world the privilege of seeing the pinnacle of motorsport and some of the world's greatest athletes in the flesh instead of on a TV screen. Just quickly though, at the moment the channel is still in a bit of a rough patch, and while the off-season is a quiet time in the world of Formula One, this gradual decline the channel has been experiencing since May of last year, caused by the algorithm inexplicably becoming very unfriendly, continues to persist, and is still putting the future of the channel at risk. In a poll I put out last November, almost 80% of the 2,100 respondents said my videos were not appearing on their homepage. The workings of the algorithm are a mystery to many, but as almost 75% of my viewers are also not subscribed, where you can do your bits to help me is to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon, so you're always notified when I upload a new video. Always remember as well to comment to drive engagement and hopefully get the algorithm's attention again. And finally, if you want to help me even further, you can become a channel member for as little as £1 a month. Or, for slightly more, join my Patreon to get early access to audio-only versions of each video. With that out of the way, here is every circuit in Formula One history explained. And buckle up, because this one's a long one.
Brief, nigga?
Going chronologically by their first appearance on the Formula One calendar...
Silverstone Circuit. That shit look crazy. Let's see here. Straight. Yeah, slow down a little bit. Feel me? A little turn here and there type shit. Alright. Ain't too bad, bro. Ain't too bad. Silverstone Circuit. Ain't too bad.
First up is Silverstone Circuit. Silverstone straddles the border between the English counties of Northamptonshire and Buckinghamshire, 55 miles or 88 kilometres northwest of central London and 1 mile or 1.6 kilometres south of the Northamptonshire village of Silverstone.
No.
It began life as RAF Silverstone in
skydiving
1943 and was used for the training of Wellington bomber pilots. After the war ended, it was abandoned and quickly started being used for amateur racing. Soon after, the Royal Automobile Club took out a lease on the site and built a simple circuit that used the perimeter road and ran onto the runways in an hourglass shape, demarcated by hay bales. They switched to just the perimeter road in 1949, which was 2.9 miles or 4.7 kilometres in length, with the pit straight between Abbey and Woodcote, and this was what was used for the very first World Championship Grand Prix in 1950. In 1952, the British Racing Drivers Club took over the lease from the Royal Automobile Club, and new pit facilities were built between Woodcote and Copse. Between 1955 and 1986, Silverstone alternated as host of the British Grand Prix with Aintree and then Brands Hatch, and beginning in 1975, the circuit began a long and complex history of modifications to slow it down. The most notable of these were the addition of Maggots, Priory, Brooklands and Luffield in 1991, and then Farm, Arena and the Wellington Straight in 2010, followed by a brand new pit facilities between Vale and Abbey in 2011. This means that since 1950, the circuit has increased in length from 2.9 miles or 4.7 kilometres to 3.6 miles or 5.8 kilometres. Even with these drastic changes, traces of the circuit's past are still easy to find. The stretch between Abbey and Luffield is accessible on foot. Most of the original 2 runways still remain, and there are still rumble strips visible behind the Beckett's grandstand from the original Beckett's Corner used up until 1991. As well as being long-term host of the British Grand Prix, Silverstone also hosted the one-off 70th anniversary Grand Prix in 2020. The circuit has seen some of Formula One's most historic moments, with notable races including a British 1-2-3 in 1958, Jody Scheckter triggering a 10-car pile-up in 1973, Keke Rosberg setting a new average speed record in 1985, Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet's duel in 1987, Mansell Mania in 1991 and 1992, Michael Schumacher winning in the pit lane in 1998, defrocked priest Neil Horan storming the track in 2003, Lewis Hamilton's dominant win in the rain in 2008,
What the fuck? What's wrong with that? They got too much to drink, bro.
numerous tyre blowouts in 2013, Hamilton winning on 3 wheels in 2020, Hamilton and Verstappen's collision in 2021, and Zhou Guanyu's crash in 2022.
Oh,
The circuit is and always has been very fast, and as a former airfield can also be extremely windy. As such, the circuit in its long history has seen 35 fatalities, the most notable of which include Harry Schell in 1960, Bob Anderson in 1967, and Norman Brown and Peter Huber in 1983. As the home of British motorsport, it is one of the most popular circuits and races on the calendar, frequently attracting a record-breaking turnout, and has a festival atmosphere akin to Glastonbury, with many spectators camping, rain or shine. Lewis Hamilton holds a record-breaking 9 wins at Silverstone, and it will remain host of the British Grand Prix until at least 2034, and as well as Formula 1 hosts countless other series including Formula 2, Formula 3, GB3, British Motorcycles, the British Touring Car Championship, British GT Cars, and formerly hosted the Silverstone Britcar 24 Hours. Circuit de Monaco.
Circuit de Monaco, nigga. Yo, that shit look like a fun fucking circuit, bro.
Circuit de Monaco is a street circuit that runs through the Monte Carlo and La Condamine districts of the Principality of Monaco. The circuit was the brainchild of president of the Monegasque Motor Club Anthony Nogues, whose father Alexandre had founded the Monte Carlo Rally in 1911 and was opened in 1929 as the host of the Monaco Grand Prix, which became a World Championship event in 1950. Since its inauguration, the Monaco Grand Prix has been hosted every year except from 1938 to 1947, 1949, 1951, 1953 to 1954, and 2020.
Wait, hold on. They built the city around this circuit, or they built the city and it was like, hold on, we a racing circuit, bro. And them motherfuckers done built that shit. Bro! Hold on.
Because it's a street circuit built around characteristically narrow streets, the circuit has changed very little over the past 96 years, with little else changing besides the additions of the Nouvelle Chicane and the Piscine complex. For many people, when you first mention Formula 1, Monaco is what they think of. As a playground for the rich on the French Riviera, it has become emblematic of wealth and glamour, with countless drivers living in Monaco over the years due to its great weather, luxurious casinos, and generous tax policies. The circuit itself has the lowest average speed of any in Formula 1, and as the years have gone by, and Formula 1 cars have gotten larger and faster, has become increasingly ill-suited to producing good racing. Nelson Piquet once said of it that driving are suited to producing good racing. Faster has become increasingly ill-suited to producing good racing.
Oh damn, bro. That's a tight corner, bro. God damn. Oh, and they gotta go. And there's another corner. Holy shit. There's 2 corners. Yo, niggas is doing 20 miles an hour. Holy shit.
Nelson Piquet once said of it that driving around it is like, quote, riding a bicycle around your bathroom, but also said a win here is worth 2 anywhere else. He would know, having never won there. While the races in the modern era are often uneventful, qualifying has no equal, as the circuit offers little to no room for error.
Ooh.
Notable races here include the pile-up triggered by a rogue wave in 1950, tight. Alberto Ascari crashing into the harbour in 1955, Paul Hawkins crashing into the harbour in 1965, no one wanting to win in 1982, Senna's win that wasn't to be in 1984, Senna rage quitting in 1988, Senna's defensive masterclass against Nigel Mansell in 1992, Olivier Panis's unprecedented win in 1996, Michael Schumacher trying to cheat in 2006, and Charles Leclerc taking the first home win in 93 years in 2024. Despite the low average speed, the circuit has historically been a dangerous one as it is such a challenge, and it ran for many years with no barriers or protection of any kind from the surrounding trees, lampposts, pavements, walls, and buildings. There have been 4 fatal accidents there: Norman Lineker in 1948, Luigi Fagioli in 1952, Dennis Taylor in 1962, and Lorenzo Bandini in 1967. Ayrton Senna holds a record 6 wins there, and it will host the Monaco Grand Prix until at least 2031. As a street circuit in a busy metropolitan area, it's only used for 3 weekends a year and only also hosts Formula 2, Formula 3, the Porsche Super Cup, Formula E, and the historic Grand Prix of Monaco. Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Indianapolis Motor Speedway, or IMS for short, as the name would suggest, is located in the eponymous Speedway suburb of western Indianapolis in the US state of Indiana. It was built by Carl Fisher.
Man, that's a fucking oval, bro. Hold on. Back up.
Suburb of western Indianapolis in the US.
Man, that shit. Nigga, I do that track. That track easy as hell, bro. All you gotta do is drive straight, kind of turn your wheel, drive a little bit straight, kind of turn your wheel, drive straight for a little bit, kind of turn your wheel. Bro.
State of Indiana.
Fuck.
It was built by Carl Fisher, James Allison, Arthur Newby, and Frank Wheeler in 1909 for $75,000, $2.6 million in 2025 money, as a simple 2.5-mile or 4-kilometre squared-off banked oval, and was only the second purpose-built racing circuit ever built, after Brooklands in the United Kingdom, and to this day is the second oldest circuit still in use, after the Milwaukee Mile, which was originally a dirt track and was paved in 1954. IMS originally had a loose, gravelly track surface, which resulted in 2 fatalities in its very first race. So, after this, it was paved over with bricks, acquiring the nickname the Brickyard. After being effectively abandoned in World War II, the circuit was paved over with asphalt in the 1950s, save for a 3-foot strip of bricks on the finish line. In 1911, it began hosting the Indianapolis 500, which from 1950 to 1960 was a Formula One World Championship event, despite the fact that it was sanctioned by the American Automobile Association and then the United States Auto Club, not the FIA, and that almost no drivers from the Indianapolis 500 also raced in Formula One. During this period, the only drivers who attempted to bridge the gap in either direction were Alberto Ascari, Chuck Day, Juan Manuel Fangio, Giuseppe Farina, Troy Ruttman, and Roger Ward. Post-1960, however, the 500 has been won numerous times by Formula One drivers, including Jim Clark in 1965, Graham Hill in 1966, Bobby Unser in 1968, 1975 and 1981, Mario Andretti in 1969, Mark Donohue in 1972, Danny Sullivan in 1985, Bobby Rahal in 1986, Emerson Fittipaldi in 1989 and 1993, Jacques Villeneuve in 1995, Eddie Cheever in 1998, Juan Pablo Montoya in 2000 and 2015, Alexander Rossi in 2016, Takuma Sato in 2017 and 2020, and Marcus Ericsson in 2022. Together with the Monaco Grand Prix and the 24 Hours of Le Mans, victory at the Indianapolis 500 forms the Triple Crown of motorsport, with Graham Hill being the only person so far to have yet achieved it, and it is also from where we get the famous phrase, "Gentlemen, start your engines." In 2000, IMS returned to the Formula One calendar as the new host of the United States Grand Prix, with an infield section being built within the banking. Despite the flat, uninspired layout, it was very popular due to making use of the banking, but this became its downfall in 2005, when a serious risk of high-speed tyre blowouts for the Michelin running cars meant that following a last-minute decision, only the 6 Bridgestone running cars started the race, and after 2007 it was dropped from the calendar. With an average speed in the modern era of well over 200 miles per hour or 330 kilometers per hour, IMS is and always has been extremely dangerous, and has witnessed no fewer than 74 fatalities, the most notable of which include William Bork and Harry Holcomb on opening day in 1909, Claude Kellum and spectators Omar Jalif and James West 2 days later, Floyd Roberts in 1939, Chet Miller in 1953, Manny Ayulo and Bill Vukovic in 1955, Pat O'Connor in 1958, Jerry Unser and Bob Kortner in 1959, Tony Bettenhausen in 1961, Mike Spence in 1968, Art Pollard, Swede Savage and mechanic Armando Turan in 1973, Scott Brayton in 1996, Tony Renner in 2003, and Peter Lenz in 2010. As well as the 500, it also hosts the Brickyard 400, IndyCar, NASCAR, and GT cars. IMS is the largest sporting venue in the world by capacity, capable of holding 400,000 spectators, and is the focal point of motorsport in the United States, being placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1975 and designated a National Historic Landmark in 1987. Circuit Bremgarten. Bremgarten was a road circuit located in the Bremgartenwald in the north of the Swiss capital of Bern. It was built in 1931 as a sort of 4.5 mile long or 7.2 kilometre long deformed square with no real straights, but lots of high-speed corners. It was originally intended for motorcycles, but began hosting the Swiss Grand Prix in 1934, which became a Formula One World Championship event in 1950. Even by 1950 standards, it was dangerous, as it ran through a thick forest, and it claimed the lives of Achille Varzi and Omobo Noteni in 1948. In 1955, it was abandoned after all motorsport was banned in Switzerland following the Le Mans disaster.
Wait, alright, so like when the season starts, where they like come together and be like, alright, boom, we're gonna pick certain like couple of circuits, like the amount of circuits, and this is the circuits that niggas is gonna race for the year. That's why I'm getting at here, right? So like niggas like, alright, we're gonna do this circuit. We're gonna do certain amount of lap of that circuit, and after that, we're gonna go into the next circuit and shit. And then like at the end of the season or whatever, we're gonna figure out like who won like the most amount of circuits.
The entire circuit, except for the short stretch from Curé to Passerella Eichholz, still exists as public roads and can be both driven and cycled on, and offers a
gosh, bro. Oh my gosh, bro. Oh my gosh, bro. Oh my gosh, bro.
tranquil and picturesque route around the Bremgarten forest.
Yo, what?
Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Spa-Francorchamps is named as such because it lies 1 mile or 1.6 kilometres southeast of the village of Francorchamps and 5 miles or 8 kilometres southeast of the town of Spa, nestled in the Ardennes forest in the province of Liège in the French-speaking Wallonia region of Belgium. It began life in 1921 as a road circuit made from public roads connecting Francorchamps to the nearby towns of Bjornenwil and Stavelot, and traversed what just 2 years earlier had been the border between Belgium and the German Empire. This circuit was over 9 miles long or 14.5 kilometres and was incredibly high speed, with the only slow sections being the La Source hairpin at Francorchamps, the Virage de l'Ancienne Douane hairpin that went around the former customs house for the border, itself formed by the creek Eau Rouge, and the Stavelot hairpin at the opposite end of the circuit. It began hosting the Belgian Grand Prix in 1925 and was on the calendar for the inaugural Formula One season in 1950. By this point, the Virage de l'Ancienne Douane had been removed and the track now cut straight up the hill with a new corridor called Raidillon, making the track even faster, and it had developed a fearsome reputation as the track was very narrow and was surrounded by trees, houses, barns and telegraph poles. Due to several fatal accidents that had taken place, the race was boycotted and cancelled in 1969 and then again in 1971, and Nivelles-Boulay and Circuit Zolder became the new Belgian Grand Prix host circuits while Spa was modernised. Formula One returned to Spa in 1983, and by now it had been shortened drastically, with the Bjornenwil, Master and Stavelot sections cut off, and an entirely new second sector was built that went dramatically downhill through a series of hairpins and medium-speed corners, but also included the fearsome Pouron.
Oh, that's tough.
This layout was down to just 4.3 miles or 6.9 kilometres in length, still on the longer side, and had proper crash barriers and gravel traps installed, as well as a new pit lane and starting grid just before La Source instead of just after it. Something which hadn't changed was the local climate, as the circuit is frequently hit by heavy rain that can appear out of nowhere, with the surrounding hills either trapping it in or out. Most notably in 1998, which gave us the largest crash in Formula One history, and 2021, which gave us
nothing at all.
A temporary chicane was added at Eau Rouge in 1994 following the events at Imola, and it wasn't until 2000 that the circuit was cut off from the public road network and reclassified from a semi-permanent road circuit to a permanent race circuit. And in 2007, the bus stop chicane was changed from left to right to left. The 2003 race was cancelled due to a new federal ban on tobacco advertising, and the 2006 race was cancelled due to necessary repair work. But otherwise, Spa has held the Belgian Grand Prix uninterrupted since 1983 and will continue to do so until at least 2031, though on rotation. In the past 102 years, there have been 49 fatal accidents at Spa, the most notable of which are Richard Seaman in 1939, Archie Scott Brown in 1958, Chris Bristow and Alan Stacey within a few minutes of one another in 1960, Stefan Beloff in 1985, Antoine Hubert in 2019, and Delano van 't Hoff in 2023. The majority of these took place in the defunct part of the circuit, but 9 of the 15 fatal accidents since 1978 have involved the Eau Rouge Raidillon complex. Eau Rouge is less of a challenge than it once was, as it can now be easily taken flat by modern Formula 2 cars, but Raidillon is a blind crest leading onto the Kemmel Strait that has had increasingly large amounts of runoff added in recent years, and attempts to remove bumps from what is naturally a very bumpy former road circuit. Res-Gur. Res-Gur, and sorry to any French listeners, but this is as close as this English mouth can get to what is less a word and more an involuntary sound, was a road circuit located half a mile or 0.8 of a kilometre northeast of the village of Gur and 4 miles or 6.4 kilometres west of the city of Retz in the French region of Grand Est. It opened in 1926 as the host of the Grand Prix de la Marne, and in 1950 began hosting the French Grand Prix.
That one looks like
it was
fun.
a fast circuit with very long straights, surrounded by farmland, and originally went through Retz village, but had this bit closed off in 1952 and was extended further to the north. The 1953 race was dubbed the Race of the Century due to a race-long battle for the lead between Mike Hawthorn, Juan Manuel Fangio, Jose Froilan Gonzalez and Alberto Ascari. The 1954 race saw the debut of the Mercedes-Benz W196 Streamliner, and the 1958 race saw the retirement of Fangio. Its high-speed nature made it one of the more dangerous circuits, with 10 fatalities there, the most notable of which being Herbert Mackay Fraser and Bill Whitehouse in 1957, Luigi Musso in 1958, and Peter Ryan in 1962. It alternated with...
So all them circuits that be like looking like it's easy and it has like bad straight roads and shit. Niggas gonna be flying down those motherfucking circuits. That's a fact, bro. Cause like, think about it. Straight line, punching the gas real quick, feel me? But like the complicated ones though, like that's like more technical shit. You gotta like really take them corners correctly. But like the fast circuits, bro. So all this whole time talking about some easy shit. This is a fast race right here, bro.
With Rouen-les-Essarts for several years and last hosted the French Grand Prix in 1966 and then closed in 1972. As public roads, the circuit still exists in its entirety except for the stretch from turns 2 to 3, which is now private farmland, and the long straight from turns 3 to 5, which has been built...
Oh yeah, niggas is speeding the fuck out of these roads, bro. Oh my gosh, bro. That is a... Bro, niggas is... What he said, like 200 miles per hour, my nigga? Oh my god. What? 200 miles per hour, bro. Down these roads. What's the fastest I went? I think I went like fast I went. Nah, I went like at least 150. 150. Yeah. But 200 miles plus is goddamn.
Built over as a dual carriageway. Remarkably, however, the circuit is something of a time capsule, as the pit garages, timing tower and main grandstand have all been preserved exactly as they were when the circuit closed, including with the original billboards and advertising, which are easily accessible as they are literally right by the road. Autodromo Internazionale di Monza. Monza International Circuit is located in the Royal Villa of Monza, a forest formerly used as hunting grounds, 10 miles or 16 kilometres northeast of Milan in the Italian region of Lombardy. It was built in 1922, being only the third permanent race circuit in the world after Brooklands and Indianapolis, and originally comprised a high-speed L-shaped road course, adjoined to a highly banked oval called the Pista di Alta Velocità, or high-speed course. It began hosting the Italian Grand Prix in 1922, which became a Formula One World Championship event in 1950, and has hosted it every year since, except for 1980. The Pista di Alta Velocità was abandoned in 1969 due to it simply being too fast.
They gotta fucking curve the roads, bro. Gotta curve the roads like this, man.
And over the years, the main circuit has been gradually slowed down with the addition of 3 chicanes. Historic races there include Giuseppe Farina becoming Formula One's first drivers' champion in 1950, Peter Collins handing the title to Juan Manuel Fangio in 1956, a photo finish in 1969 and again in 1971, Niki Lauda's return from near death in 1976, a failed win for McLaren in 1988, Mika Hakkinen throwing the win away in 1999, Michael Schumacher's retirement announcement in 2006, Sebastian Vettel's first win in 2008, and Pierre Gasly's unexpected win in 2020. It's the fastest circuit in modern Formula 1 and requires minimal downforce, and such high speeds make the races very short, as the 2023 Italian Grand Prix was wrapped up in 1 hour and 13 minutes. It being so fast has also made it a very dangerous circuit, and it has seen 86 fatalities, the most notable of which are Emilio Materassi and 20 spectators in 1928, Emilio Villoresi in 1939, Alberto Ascari in 1955, Wolfgang von Trips and 15 spectators in 1961, Jochen Rindt in 1970, Jarno Saarinen in 1973, Silvio Moser in 1974, Ronnie Peterson in 1978, and Marshal Paolo Ghilimberti in 2000. Monza is known as the Temple of Speed and the home ground for the Tifosi, and is one of the bigger races on the Formula 1 calendar. It will continue to host the Italian Grand Prix until at least 2031, and as well as Formula 1 hosts Formula 2, Formula 3, FRECA, Italian F4 and assorted GT cars. The Nürburgring. The Nürburgring is nestled in the Eifel Mountains and encircles the town of Nürburg in the German state of Rhineland-Pfalz, 28 miles or 45 kilometers west of the city of Koblenz.
The mountains.
The circuit was first built between 1925 and...
Oh! First of all, that looks so nice. That looks nice as fuck. That looks relaxing as shit. That shit look hard too. Mad turns and twists and turns and shit. So niggas isn't really flying down this track for real, bro. Niggas is focusing on the turns. On a mountain, bro. On a mountain, uphill, downhill. Nah, bro. That's technical as shit.
And 1927, after then Mayor of Cologne and future Bundeskanzler Konrad Adenauer convinced the Weimar government to supply 15 million Reichsmark to fund it, equivalent to $3.6 million or $64 million in 2025 money. It was originally intended to be a first-rate testing venue and to emulate the Targa Florio, and as such was a gargantuan 17.5 miles or 28.2 kilometers long, making it the longest purpose-built permanent racing circuit ever built. It first started hosting the Eifelrennen, and soon after started hosting the German Grand Prix, which joined the Formula 1 calendar in 1951. By this point, the circuit had been split into the Nordschleife and the Südschleife, with the former being used for Formula 1, itself almost 12 miles or 19 kilometers long. Jackie Stewart nicknamed it the Green Hell, and it was removed from the calendar in 1970 to carry out major safety improvements. Despite that, it was still too dangerous, and was removed permanently after 1976, which saw Niki Lauda's near-fatal accident there. The circuit being extremely narrow and bumpy, with huge elevation changes, made it a perilous challenge for drivers, and its sheer size could make it a logistical nightmare, with the furthest part of the circuit being over 3.5 miles or 5.6 kilometers from the paddock. The circuit owners, however, were determined to bring Formula 1 back, and considered using the Südschleife, that itself was almost 5 miles or 8 kilometers long, and shared the Nordschleife's characteristics of being narrow, bumpy, and surrounded by trees, banks, and ditches. The Südschleife was abandoned, and in 1984 was partially built over with a brand new circuit called the Grand Prix Strecke, that was 2.8 miles or 4.5 kilometers long, and featured state-of-the-art pit facilities, a much wider track, and large gravel and runoff areas. For its opening, an exhibition race was run featuring an assortment of Formula 1 drivers and sports car legends all driving identical Mercedes-Benz 190Es, and was won by a young Ayrton Senna. It hosted the European Grand Prix in 1984, and then again from 1995 to 1996 and 1999 to 2007, and then alternated with the Hockenheimring as German Grand Prix host until 2013, hosted the Luxembourg Grand Prix in 1997 and 1998, and also hosted the one-off Eifel Grand Prix in 2020. Notable races at the Nürburgring include Juan Manuel Fangio's final win in 1957, Jackie Stewart's dominant win in 1968, Carnage in 1999, and Markus Winkelhock leading on his debut in 2007. The number of fatalities at the circuit is estimated to total over 100, and notable examples include Onofre Marimon in 1954, Erwin Bauer and Peter Collins in 1958, Rudolf Moser and Carol Godin de Beaufort in 1964, John Taylor in 1966, Georges Berger in 1967, Gerhard Misser in 1969, Herbert Müller in 1981, Leo Löwenstein in 2010, and spectator Andy Herman in 2015. The main event held there is the Nürburgring 24 Hours for GT cars, and the Nürburgring also hosts DTM, motorcycles, and assorted GT car events. The Nordschleife is extremely popular for track days, known as Touristenfahrten, with people often driving their own cars on it, and over the years has acquired countless amounts of iconic graffiti. The Nordschleife, regrettably, will probably never be used for Formula 1 again, but the Grand Prix Strecke could well return in the future. Circuito de Pedralbes. Pedralbes Circuit was a street circuit located in the Pedralbes neighbourhood in the western part of the Spanish city of Barcelona. It opened in 1946 with a simple arrow shape at 2.7 miles or 4.3 kilometres long, and in 1951 was extended to just under 4 miles or 6.4 kilometres in time to host the Spanish Grand Prix. It hosted it again in 1954 and 4 times hosted the Peñarín Grand Prix for motorcycles. Unlike a lot of other street circuits, it was wide and open as it made use of boulevards and major city streets. It was closed, however, after the 1955 Le Mans disaster and never used again. It still exists in its entirety and is fully navigable, aside from the Turn 1 hairpin, which is now an overpass. Roanne-les-Essarts. Roanne-les-Essarts lay on a forested hill in between 2 meanders of the Seine, 8 miles or 13 kilometres southwest of the city of Roanne and adjacent to the village of Les Essarts in Normandy in France. It was built in 1950 as a road circuit to lay out 3.2 miles or 5.1 kilometres
That track looks like it's a nice track.
in length,
That's a nice
and
track.
for the time featured state-of-the-art pit facilities and grandstands. In 1955,
Now
it was
too bad.
extended considerably to
Niggas is
4.1
speeding
miles
down
or
that straight,
6.5 kilometres in length.
Speeding,
In
bro.
1972, it was shortened with a new, more technical middle sector to 3.4 miles or 5.5 kilometres in length, and then in 1974 a chicane
Aye.
was added at the very fast Six Frères kink, which led onto the cobbled Nouveau Monde chicane at the southern tip of the circuit. From 1952 to 1968, it hosted the French Grand Prix on 5 occasions, but despite its popularity, was dropped as a Formula 1 venue following Joe Schlesser's fiery death there in the 1968 race. It continued to host domestic events, but in 1994 was closed as it wasn't possible to get it up to modern safety standards, and in 1999 all infrastructure was demolished, and what was the paddock is now used for storing logging. The original 1950 layout can still be driven in its entirety. The Turn 10 corner Rézil of the 1955 layout has been torn up and now joined onto a dual carriageway. The 1972 layout can be driven except for the technical middle sector, which was torn up but is accessible on foot, and the chicane edition from the 1974 layout is now a lay-by, only a few metres from where Joe Schlesser died. Circuit Zandvoort. Circuit Zandvoort is built on sand dunes just north of the town of Zandvoort and only 500 metres from the North Sea, 14 miles or 22 kilometres west of the Dutch capital of Amsterdam. It was built in
Ain't too
1948 and originally called
Ain't
Circuit
too
van
bad.
Zandvoort,
Ain't
then
too
Circuit
bad.
Park Zandvoort from 1989, and then finally Circuit Zandvoort since 2017. It began hosting the Dutch Grand Prix in 1950, which was added to the Formula 1 calendar in 1952. It held it on-off until 1985, and in that time used a very fast, expansive layout, but had large chicanes added in 1972 and 1980 to slow the cars down. In 1990, mostly as a way to assuage issues with noise pollution for local residents, the track was shortened drastically from 2.6 miles or 4.2 kilometres in length to just 1.6 miles or 2.6 kilometres in length, and the southern section was torn up and had a caravan park and sports centre built over it. In 1999, part of the closed section was rebuilt to create a more expansive middle sector, and then the Dutch Grand Prix returned there in 2021. In both its old and modern layouts, the circuit has been characterised by fast, sweeping corners and is heavily cambered and also has banking.
Ooh.
Historically,
That
it
was
is best
lit.
remembered for the deaths of Piers
That
Courage
was
in 1970
fucking lit,
and
bro.
Roger Williamson in 1973, and today for being Max Verstappen's home ground, who has won 3 of the last 4 Grand Prix there. Overtaking is difficult, but the circuit offers a spectacle, having the feel of a roller coaster, and will host the Dutch Grand Prix until 2026 and then leave the calendar. Autódromo de Buenos Aires Oscar y Juan Galvez. The Oscar and Juan Galvez circuit of Buenos Aires was built in 1952 under Argentinian President Juan Perón, who originally named it the Autódromo 17 de Octubre, or October 17th Circuit, the Day of Loyalty Day, to commemorate the labour movement that got Perón released from prison in 1945. After he was overthrown 10 years later, the circuit was renamed as the Municipal City Circuit of Buenos Aires, then another 10 years later as the Municipal Circuit of the Almirante Brown Park of the city of Buenos Aires, and then from 1989 was named after racing driver Oscar Alfredo Galvez, who raced at the inaugural Argentine Grand Prix there in 1953 and finished 5th, and then in 2008 received its current name, also commemorating his elder brother Juan. The circuit is built on marshland in the Villa Riachuelo neighbourhood in southern Buenos Aires, 7 miles or 11.3 kilometers southwest of the city centre and on the banks of the Rio Matanza. The circuit has little to no elevation change and is notable for the large number of alternate layouts it offers, the most notable of which are the number 12, 14 and 15 layouts, which utilise a very large extension that goes around the Lago de Regates. The remaining layouts use the infield section of the circuit, which is characterised by the large number of hairpins and low-speed corners. It was the sole host of the Argentine Grand Prix on-off from 1953 to 1998, and in that time made use of the number 2, 6, 9 and 15 layouts. The circuit was known for being a very physically demanding one, mostly due to the rather unforgiving local climate, but also received criticism for its build quality, lying on not particularly strong foundations. In the 1980 race, the intense heat combined with the suction power of the ground effect cars meant the track was breaking apart, and in 1982 the race was abruptly cancelled following the outbreak of the Falklands War and Carlos Reutemann's unexpected retirement. Local hero Juan Manuel Fangio is the most successful Formula One driver there, winning 4 consecutive races from 1954 to 1957. Its Formula One days are long behind it, but these days it hosts the Stock Car Pro Series as well as various Argentine touring car series. Aintree Motor Racing Circuit. Aintree is located in the village of Aintree in Sefton in the English county of Merseyside, 6 miles or 10 kilometres northeast of the city of Liverpool. It began life in 1829 as Aintree Racecourse for horse racing, and in 1954 a circuit was built there which was billed as the Goodwood of the North. It hosted the British Grand Prix on 5 occasions from 1955 to 1962. It was a popular event and could hold up to 150,000 spectators, and in 1957 saw Stirling Moss and Tony Brooks become the first British winners of the British Grand Prix in a British car. The full Grand Prix circuit has not been used since 1964, but the smaller club circuit, half its length at 1.5 miles or 2.4 kilometres, is still used today for small-scale events and meetups, mostly for classic cars and bikes, but the site is mainly catered towards horse racing and also features a 9-hole golf course in the infield. Circuito di Pescara. Pescara Circuit was a road circuit located in and around the Italian city of Pescara. It was first opened in 1934 at a whopping 16 miles or 25.7 kilometres in length, almost as long as the full Nürburgring. It had a sort of deformed triangle shape with 2 extremely long straights, which were both 3.5 miles or 5.6 kilometres in length, and then a technical section that climbed through the surrounding hills. It was praised by the drivers for the challenge it offered, as it was long, narrow and bumpy, and for the beauty of the surrounding scenery, but this also made it extremely dangerous, and it saw the death of Guy Moll in 1934. The main event there was called the Coppa Acerdo, which, due to its namesake being a prominent fascist, was renamed Circuito di Pescara after the war. It also hosted the Pescara Grand Prix, which made a one-off appearance on the Formula One calendar in 1957. In so doing, it became the longest Grand Prix circuit in Formula One history. It drew over 200,000 spectators and was won by Stirling Moss, but Ferrari were absent as Enzo Ferrari refused to let his drivers race there. It never appeared on the calendar again and was closed in 1961 on safety grounds. As a street circuit, it still exists in its entirety, and the full course can be driven, though a small section goes through a roundabout and the car park for the Pescara railway station, offering a picturesque drive. Circuito de Boa Vista. Boa Vista Circuit was a street circuit 3 miles or 4.8 kilometers northwest of central Porto in Portugal. It opened in 1950 and was built on the harbourfront and had Boa Vista Avenue form its backbone, hence the name, before twisting through some of the narrower roads in the neighbourhood, being 4.8 miles or 7.8 kilometres in length. It first hosted the Portuguese Grand Prix in 1951, and the following year was shortened slightly before the Portuguese Grand Prix joined the Formula 1 calendar in 1958. In this race, Stirling Moss famously surrendered to the championship after vouching to have title rival Mike Hawthorn's disqualification overturned. It hosted the Grand Prix again in 1960, but after this was dropped from the calendar and then closed down. 45 years later, in 2005, however, the circuit was reopened, but had been shortened drastically to 3 miles or 4.8 kilometres. Every 2 years it hosted a round of the World Touring Car Championship, as well as support series such as International Formula Master and the Seat Leon Euro Cup, but it closed again for good in 2015. 10 years later, all 3 layouts are fully navigable as all original roads still exist. Ain Diab Circuit. Ain Diab was a road circuit located 5 miles west of downtown Casablanca in Morocco. It was built in 6 weeks in 1957 by the Royal Automobile Club of Morocco and was a simple square shape using the coastal road facing the Atlantic Ocean and the main road connecting Azamor to Casablanca, being 4.7 miles or 7.6 kilometres in length. The first link road connecting these 2 roads was shared by the smaller Anfa circuit, which had hosted the Moroccan Grand Prix in the early 1930s. Ain Diab took over after opening, and in 1958 the Moroccan Grand Prix was added to the Formula 1 calendar as the season finale, becoming Formula 1's first excursion into Africa. In this race, Mike Hawthorn was crowned champion and then announced his immediate retirement, but it was also marred by the death of Stuart Lewis Evans, whose car caught fire, with him dying in hospital in the United Kingdom 8 days later. After this, the circuit was closed and not used again, but, along with the adjoining Anfa circuit, still exists in its entirety as public roads. AVUS. AVUS stands for Automobiler Verkehrs- und Übungsstraße, which translated into Church of England means Automobile Traffic and Training Road. It was built in 1921 and is one of the most eccentric circuit designs in motorsport history, as it was originally 2 6-mile-long or 9.7 kilometre-long straights running side by side, connected by hairpins at either end, built in the Grunewald forest, 4.5 miles or 7.2 kilometres west-southwest of central Berlin in Germany. It hosted the German Grand Prix for the first time in 1926, but from there on was used primarily as a testing track. In 1936, it was modified, with the 2 hairpins at either end being incredibly heavily banked, with the Nordkehre set at 43 degrees. It was made of bricks and became known as the Todesmauer, or Wall of Death, as it lacked a retaining barrier at the top, and the following year Luigi Fagioli set a new world lap speed record of 176 miles per hour in the Auto Union Type C. The circuit was inactive when Moustache Man began his Europe-wide Grand Tour, but on his orders, the circuit was connected to the Rijksautobahn network in 1940, becoming a road circuit. Racing resumed in 1951, but the circuit was shortened drastically to just 5.1 miles or 8.4 kilometres. In 1959, it made its sole appearance on the Formula 1 calendar as the host of the German Grand Prix. The race was won by Tony Brooks, but was marred by the death of Jean Behre in a sports car support race, who flew off the top of the Wall of Death. In 1967, the banking at the Nordkehre was demolished, and the circuit continued to host DTM and Formula 3 races. It was shortened several times in the 1980s and 1990s, eventually down to just 1.6 miles or 2.6 kilometres, with chicanes added as well. The collapse of the Berlin Wall in 1989 increased traffic demands, making it less practical to host races, and so it was closed for good in 1998. Today, the main straights still exist as the northbound and southbound stretches of Bundesautobahn 115. Both hairpins are gone, with the original Südkehre being marked by a large clearing in the woods and curbing hidden away in the vegetation. But at the northern end, the hairpin that replaced the original banking is now a car park for lorries, but the original wooden grandstand has been preserved, as has the podium, and the control tower, topped with the distinctive Mercedes-Benz emblem, is now a closed motel and restaurant. Circuito de Monsanto. Monsanto Park Circuit was a street circuit in the Monsanto Forest Park, 3.5 miles or 5.6 kilometers west of central Lisbon. It was built in 1953 and proved challenging as it was on the side of a hill and had several changes of track surface and also crossed tram lines. In 1959, it replaced Boa Vista as the host of the Portuguese Grand Prix, which was won by Stirling Moss. It didn't appear on the calendar again but hosted domestic events until closing in 1971. Today, the entire layout is still navigable aside from a new set of slip roads at Turn 1 and 4 sets of roundabouts crossing the circuit. Sebring International Raceway. Sebring is built 6 miles or 9.6 kilometers southeast of Sebring in Florida. It was built in 1950 as the brainwave of Russian-American aeronautical engineer Alec Ullman on what had been the Hendricks Army Airfield, which in 1946 became Sebring Regional Airport. It made use of the runways and was primarily intended as America's answer to Circuit de la Sarthe in France, and began hosting the 12 Hours of Sebring in 1952. In 1959, it was chosen to host the United States Grand Prix, which made its debut on the Formula 1 calendar. The race was won by Bruce McLaren, but its extremely bumpy nature, high costs, and poor attendance meant it was not used again, and the United States Grand Prix returned to Riverside the following year. The circuit has been modified several times over the years to be more accommodating of the still active airport it's built on, and the 12 Hours of Sebring has become its flagship event. It also hosts a variety of GT and sports car events, and is the winter home of the Skip Barber Racing School. Riverside International Raceway. Riverside International Raceway was located in Moreno Valley in Riverside County in Southern California, 12 miles or 19 kilometers south of San Bernardino, and 56 miles or 91 kilometers east-southeast of downtown Los Angeles. It was built in 1957 as Riverside International Motor Raceway, and there was a fatality on its opening weekend. Dan Gurney's career was launched there soon after, however. It proved tough on brakes as it had a long downhill straight going into a 180-degree hairpin, and in 1958 was chosen as the new host of the United States Grand Prix. After a year in Sebring, it returned to Riverside in 1960, now as a Formula 1 event. Stirling Moss won the race, but like with Sebring, it was poorly attended and not used again. It continues to be used actively for NASCAR and sports cars, and saw the deaths of Ken Miles in 1966 and Rolf Stommelen in 1983. Due to its relative proximity to Hollywood, it was also regularly used as a set for film and television. In the 1980s, however, Moreno Valley was being rapidly developed, and the new residents began protesting against the noise from the circuit, so it was closed in 1989. These days, there is no trace at all of the house that Dan Gurney built, as it was levelled and replaced with residential neighbourhoods and the gargantuan Moreno Valley Mall at Towngate. A lot of the new streets are named after famous drivers, however, such as Gurney Place, Donahue Court, and Brabham Street. Watkins Glen International. Watkins Glen, commonly known as The Glen, is located in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, 3.6 miles or 5.6 kilometers southwest of Watkins Glen at the southern tip of Seneca Lake, and 186 miles or 300 kilometers northwest of New York City. It was built in 1956 by Bill Milliken as Watkins Glen Grand Prix Racecourse and was 2.3 miles or 3.8 kilometers in length, and in 1961 was chosen as the third host in 3 years of the United States Grand Prix. It hosted it until 1980, and in 1971 was extended with a new hairpin section called the Boot, increasing in length to 3.4 miles or 5.4 kilometers. Unlike its predecessors, it was an extremely popular event, as it was heavily cambered with many blind corners and set in rolling hills in classic New England autumnal scenery. But as time went on, it became increasingly ill-suited to modern Formula 1 cars, and was marred by the near death of Graham Hill in 1969, and the extremely violent deaths of Francois Sever and Helmut Koenig in 1973 and 1974 respectively. It was dropped from the Formula 1 calendar after 1980, and in 1991 underwent a major overhaul after another fatal accident. To this day, it is regularly used for IMSA, NASCAR and sports cars, and sometimes hosts music festivals as well, including a then record-breaking attendance of 600,000 at the Summer Jam in 1973. Prince George Circuit. Prince George Circuit is located on the opposite banks of the Buffalo River from East London in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa. When it was first built in 1934, it was an enormous road circuit over 15 miles or 24 kilometres in length, running through the sand dunes facing the Southern Ocean. It was shortened to 11.6 miles or 18.6 kilometres in 1936, and in 1959 was completely redesigned and shortened further to 2.4 miles or 3.9 kilometres in length, in preparation for hosting the now Formula One sanctioned South African Grand Prix. It did so in 1962, 1963 and 1965, but in 1966 was demoted to non-championship status as it was felt it was too small for Formula One, and the following year the South African Grand Prix moved to Kyalami. To this day it continues to be used for domestic events, though the stretch from Beacon Bend to Copacabana Corner is still a public road, and the circuit doesn't have any grandstands. Zeltweg Air Base. Inspired by the success of Silverstone, in 1959 a circuit was built by a group of motoring enthusiasts on the main runway of Zeltweg Air Base in the Eichsfeld Basin in Styria, Austria. It was a simple mirrored L shape with just 4 corners and an extremely abrasive and bumpy track surface. It hosted the inaugural Austrian Grand Prix in 1963, which the following year was made a World Championship event, won by Lorenzo Bandini, but was not used for Formula One again and was abandoned in 1969 following the construction of the Österreichring just 1 mile or 1.6 kilometres to the north. What was the Hangar Kurve at Turn 2 has been torn up and built over, but the rest of the circuit still exists as the main runway for the Fliegerhorst Hinterstoicer, the main airfield of the Austrian Air Force, home to the Zweite Staffel Überwachungsgeschwader. Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez is located 2 miles southeast of downtown Mexico City. It was built in 1959 as the Autodromo Magdalena Michuca, named after the park it was built in, having been designed 6 years earlier as the university thesis of civil engineering student Oscar Fernandez, at 3.1 miles or 5 kilometers in length. It began hosting the Mexican Grand Prix in 1962, which the following year became a World Championship event. Its most distinctive feature was the banked Peraltada corner, which ran onto the extremely long main straight. Brothers Pedro and Ricardo Rodriguez were making names at this time, but unfortunately Ricardo was killed at the circuit in 1962, and Pedro was killed in a sports car race in 1971, and so, in 1973, the circuit was renamed to Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, or Rodriguez Brothers Circuit. By this point, it had already been dropped from the Formula One calendar due to crowd control issues from the over-enthusiastic spectators. In 1986, however, it did return, having been slightly modified and generally made safer. 6 years later, however, it was dropped again, as the air pollution was overwhelming, and since Mexico City is built on reclaimed land in a former lake, there are constant problems with subsidence, making the circuit extremely bumpy. 23 years later, in 2015, however, it returns to host the Mexican Grand Prix for a 3rd time. By this point, however, Hermann Tilke had got his grubby hands on it, and replaced the first half of Peraltada with an extremely tight chicane cutting through a baseball stadium built in the infield, and also shortened and simplified the technical middle sector. In 2021, it began hosting the Mexico City Grand Prix, and will do so until at least 2025. Notable races include a Titanic title battle in 1964, Alain Prost's Supreme Drive in 1990, and Lewis Hamilton securing the title in 2017 and 2018. Modern Formula One cars can reach up to 230 miles per hour or 370 kilometers per hour on the main straight, and the race gets extremely good attendance, though that may plummet with the absence of Sergio Perez. Outside of Formula One, the circuit also hosts Formula E, NASCAR, North and Central American Formula 4, and touring cars. Brands Hatch. Brands Hatch is located just north of the village of West Kingsdown in Kent in the United Kingdom. It's named after the natural amphitheatre in which it sits and started out in the 1920s as a dirt track for cyclists built on farmland. Eventually, motorcycles started using it, but it was heavily bombed during World War II. In 1950 though, it was tarmacked with a layout of a simple kidney shape run counterclockwise at 0.75 miles or 1.2 kilometres in length. In 1954, this was switched to clockwise and the Druid's hairpin was added. Then, in 1960, the circuit was more than doubled in size to 2.65 miles or 4.3 kilometres and now offered two layouts, the Grand Prix layout and the much shorter Indy layout that bypassed this through what would become McLaren Bend. In 1964, it was chosen as the new venue for the British Grand Prix and alternated with Silverstone as host circuit until 1986. In 1983 and 1985, it also hosted the European Grand Prix, and from 1965 to 1983 also hosted the non-championship Race of Champions. The circuit was very popular as it was very bumpy, extremely heavily cambered, and had huge elevation change, particularly the 29-degree dip at Paddock Hill Bend, all caused by the local topography. However, it was generally viewed as inferior to Silverstone, which as a former airfield was far more accommodating and had far greater room for expansion and development. Brands Hatch has seen 56 fatalities since 1949, the most notable of which include Florian Camathias in 1965, Joe Siffert in 1971, Brian Maguire in 1977, Henry Surtees in 2009, and Marshal Robert Foote in 2021. Noise restrictions due to the nearby village means that the circuit has a 6:30 p.m. curfew, and the full Grand Prix layout can only be used a few times a year. Nonetheless, it has a busy schedule, hosting British touring cars, GT cars, Euro NASCAR, Superbikes, GB3, GB4 and British F4, and trucks, among others. In the 1990s and 2000s, Formula 1 made an unofficial return in the form of the Boss GP series, and in 2012, the circuit hosted the road cycling events of the Summer Paralympics, with the men's H4 time trial and road race both being won by former Formula 1 driver Alex Zanardi. Circuit de Cherade. Cherade Circuit is a road circuit built on the Puy de Dôme, a heavily eroded extinct volcano 3 miles or 5 kilometers southwest of the city of Clermont-Ferrand in the Puy de Dôme departement in the Auvergne in France.
That looks like a fun.
It was designed in 1956 by President of the Sports Association of the Automobile Club of Auvergne, Jean Auchatre, and racing driver Louis Rosier, though he would not live to see its construction. As such, when it opened in 1958, it was named the Circuit de Cherade Louis Rosier, and was marketed as France's answer to the Nürburgring. The original layout was 5 miles or 8 kilometers long, and was very dangerous, with several switchbacks and sheer drops.
Oh shit.
As the site of an extinct volcano, it was also very bumpy and had constant problems with rockfall. It began hosting the French Grand Prix in 1965, and hosted it 3 other times, in 1969, 1970 and 1972. Eventually, it was deemed to be too dangerous, as in the 1972 races, 10 drivers suffered punctures caused by loose stones, and one of these stones went through Helmut Marko's visor and blinded him in his left eye, ending his racing career. It continued to host small-scale events, but in 1989 most of the circuit was closed and it was shortened considerably to 2.5 miles or 4 kilometers. In 2000, it was closed off from the public road network, and now mostly hosts track days and historical events, though most of the original closed layout is still accessible as public roads. Kyalami Grand Prix Circuit. Kyalami is located in the Kyalami district of Midrand in the province of Gauteng, 15 miles or 24 kilometers north of Johannesburg in South Africa. Its name comes from the Zulu Kyalami, which means my home, and it was built in 1961 by chairman of the South African Automotive Racing Association Dick Bremner and Harry Pearce. In 1967, it began hosting the South African Grand Prix as a replacement for Prince George Circuit, and attracted a lot of local drivers. The original layout was relatively simple at 2.55 miles or 4.1 kilometers in length, but proved dangerous as it saw 9 fatalities, most notably Peter Revson in 1974, and the extremely violent deaths of Tom Price and Marshal Frederik Janssen van Vuren in 1977. As well as this, over time its inclusion on the calendar became increasingly controversial and untenable due to the South African government's continued enforcement of apartheid. In 1982, the drivers boycotted the race and staged a sit-in at the nearby Sunnyside Park Hotel over controversial new superlicense conditions imposed by FISA. And then, in 1985, Renault and Ligier both boycotted the race, in solidarity with the French government's sanctions on South Africa, and Alan Jones withdrew due to pressure from African-American employees of his team Haas Lola's sponsors, Beatrice Foods. Most of the drivers personally opposed racing there, but felt contractually obliged to do so, but after this it was dropped from the calendar. In 1989, the circuit was completely redesigned to make way for a new housing development and business park. Turns 3 to 8 were retained, but everything else was entirely new, including the paddock, and it was switched from clockwise to counterclockwise. In 1991, apartheid was abolished, and so the following year the South African Grand Prix returned, with further modifications including another new paddock. After 1993, it disappeared again, however, after the circuit's promoters went bankrupt. Owner of Porsche South Africa, Toby Venter, bought the circuit at auction in 2014 for 205 million rand, or $19 million, $25 million in 2025 money, and it now mostly hosts domestic events, and until COVID-19 came along was set to be added to the World Endurance Championship calendar. In 2023, nephew of 1979 champion Jody Scheckter, Warren Scheckter, tried to broker a deal to bring the South African Grand Prix back to Formula One, but all attempts have failed thus far due to shortage of money, Kyalami needing to be upgraded to FIA Grade 1 status, South Africa's stance on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and ongoing civil and political unrest domestically. Bugatti au Mans. Bugatti au Mans is adjoined to Circuit de la Sarthe, the home of the 24 Hours of Le Mans. It was built in 1965 as a permanent track and shares the pit straight and paddock with La Sarthe, the Dunlop chicane, and then breaks off into the infield in a series of hairpins and chicanes, and rejoins La Sarthe at the Record des Monts chicane, and is 2.6 miles or 4.2 kilometers in length. It was chosen as the latest new host of the French Grand Prix in 1967, but was universally panned as it saw a turnout of just 20,000 spectators, and many drivers felt they should have just used the full Le Mans layout, of which the Mulsanne Straight alone was longer than the entire Bugatti circuit. It was never used for Formula One again, but has since been used for just about everything else. From 2000 to 2013, it was the home base of Pescarolo Sport, and its flagship event is the 24 Hours of Le Mans motorcycle race. Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. Canadian Tire Motorsports Park is built in Woodland, 8 miles or 13 kilometres north of Bowmanville, Ontario, and 45 miles or 72 kilometres northeast of downtown Toronto. It was built in 1961 and originally named Mosport Park, with Mosport being a portmanteau of motorsport. It quickly cemented itself as Canada's premium motorsport venue, and in 1967 was chosen to host the Canadian Grand Prix. It alternated with Mont-Tremblant until 1970 and was then replaced by Circuit Île Notre-Dame in 1978. The circuit was popular as it was high speed with lots of elevation change, being 2.5 miles or 4 kilometers in length, but the race usually falling in September or October meant the weather was often poor, and thick fog meant the 1971 race was the first Grand Prix to be red flagged. Several big accidents also showed it to be inadequate safety-wise, and it has seen 16 fatalities, the most notable of which was Manfred Winkelhock in 1985. The circuit was renamed Mosport International Raceway in 1997 after being taken over by IMSA, and then Canadian Tire Motorsports Park in 2012, and is known as Canada's home of motorsport. Formula One is long gone, but the circuit still hosts NASCAR, IMSA, Superbikes, Radicals, and includes a smaller circuit used for driver training and development, built on the site of a former oval speedway, and a karting track. Circuito de Madrid-Jarama. Madrid-Jarama Circuit is located 15 miles or 24 kilometers north-northeast of the Spanish capital of Madrid, and is named after the nearby Jarama River. As part of a plan to bring Formula One back to Spain, it was commissioned by the Royal Automobile Club of Spain and designed by John Hugenholtz and opened in 1967 as Circuito del Jarama. It features lots of hairpins and tight corners and was originally 2.1 miles or 3.4 kilometers in length. It was chosen to host the non-championship Spanish Grand Prix in 1967, marking its return to Formula One after a 13-year absence, which the following year became a World Championship event. It alternated with Montjuic from 1969 to 1975, but began to decline as the 1980 race was demoted to non-championship status at the last minute. The races being held in June made them oppressively hot, and it was then dropped after 1981 as the organisers wanted to prioritise the surrounding golf courses. Overtaking was effectively impossible, and it was always more well suited to motorcycles. In 1991, the Ascari and Bugatti hairpins were enlarged, extending it to 2.4 miles or 3.8 kilometers in length. To this day, it is a prolific venue for motorcycles and also hosts truck racing and sports cars. Circuit Mont-Tremblant. Mont-Tremblant Circuit is located in the foothills of the Laurentian Mountains, 4.2 miles or 6.9 kilometers north-northwest of the Quebec ski resort town of Mont-Tremblant, and 69 miles or 111 kilometers northwest of Montreal. Mont-Tremblant is bustling during the winter ski season, but as it's largely inactive during the summer months, it was decided by local business owners in 1964 to build a circuit there. It was originally just 1.5 miles or 2.5 kilometers in length, but a year later was expanded and doubled in size to 2.7 miles or 4.3 kilometers in length. It was chosen in 1968 to alternate as host of the Canadian Grand Prix of Mosport Park, but did so only twice, as it was a small circuit in a relatively remote and inaccessible part of rural Canada, and the biting winters had a tendency to break the tarmac up. But even so, it managed to continue hosting other major events such as Can-Am, Trans Am, sports cars, IMSA, Champ Car, superbikes and touring cars. All three Villeneuves began their careers here, but these days it mostly only hosts track days and heritage events. Circuit Montjuic. Montjuic Circuit was a street circuit built on Montjuic, meaning Jewish mountain in Catalan, in Barcelona in Spain. It opened in 1932 and began hosting the Peñarín Grand Prix. It was a challenging, high-speed circuit that wrapped around the hill, at 2.4 miles or 3.8 kilometers in length, and in the 1950s began hosting motorcycle racing. In 1969, it was selected to host the Spanish Grand Prix, alternating each year with Jarama, and now being only 3 miles from the former Spanish Grand Prix host circuit of Pedralbes. At the 1975 race, however, the drivers unsuccessfully tried to boycott the race due to the poor state of the circuit, and then, in the race, there were several accidents, including race leader Rolf Stommelen crashing and killing a fireman, a spectator, and 2 photographers. So, after this, Montjuic disappeared from the Formula 1 calendar. It continued to be used primarily for motorcycles until closing in 1986. A few years later, the Olympic Park for the 1992 Summer Olympics was built adjacent to it, and it now surrounds an elaborate cultural and arts complex. As public roads, it is fully navigable, helped by the Barcelona City Council deciding to mark it out in 2004. In 2007, it reopened for a mere 48 hours to honour its 75th anniversary, and saw Emerson Fittipaldi drive his Lotus 72 that he won the race in there in 1973. Hockenheimring, Baden-Württemberg. The Hockenheimring is located in the Schwetzinger Hart forest, just east of Hockenheim in the German state of Baden-Württemberg. It was originally the brainchild of a timekeeper called Ernst Kreist, who submitted plans for a circuit to the mayor of Hockenheim in 1931, and it was built the following year. Originally, it was called the Dreieckskurs, or Triangle Course, as it ran counterclockwise and had 3 long straights with kinks in them, and a sharp hairpin at the southern end where it went into the town, and was 7.5 miles or 12 kilometres in length. This layout did not last long, however, as in 1938 it was shortened considerably to 4.8 miles or 7.6 kilometres, with the 2 straights joined at the north end by the Spitzkurve being replaced with the high-speed Ostkurve. At this point, it was renamed to the Kurpfalzring, or the rather less romantic Electorate of the Palatinate Ring in English. It was heavily damaged by tanks during World War II, and after being repaired was renamed to the Hockenheimring. It began hosting motorcycle events, but in 1965 had to be redesigned again after being bisected by the newly built Bundesautobahn 6. This time, the Westkurve hairpin was removed, and a new stadium section with enclosed grandstands and a brand new paddock was designed by John Hugenholtz, who you may remember from earlier in this video as the designer of Jarama. This new layout included the Sachskurve and the Südkurve hairpins in the stadium section, but the rest of the circuit ran through the forest and was incredibly fast. In 1968, Jim Clark was killed in a crash in the forest section in a Formula 2 car, which necessitated the installation of 2 chicanes to slow the cars down, one of which was named after him. And then, in 1970, it was chosen as a one-off replacement for the Nürburgring to host the German Grand Prix. It then replaced it on a permanent basis from 1977, aside from the new Nürburgring Grand Prix Strecke hosting the race in 1985. It was a very popular race and became...
So there's mad calendars, man. There's like Formula 1, NASCAR, touring. There's like hold on, I'm trying to figure out how many like racing social business. Okay, there's like a little bit. Just a little bit. Feel me? No, but that's not like there's like subcategories and shit. What are racing series? States. So it's like what? So I feel like Formula One, NASCAR championships, or Formula One, NASCAR, with rally. But I don't hear much about rally racing no more because I feel like rally is like off road type, under street type shit. So I don't think there's like much rally racing going on anymore. Feel me? And plus, it's like I feel like all the cars. I felt like the specs and shit has to be created and customized for each race. So that's why there's like so many different type of races. You feel me? Um, so I feel like all these races, like the rules must be like mad particular because like not every car is the same, but racing wise, I feel like the cars have to be the same. You can't have like a rear wheel car in a race with a front wheel car. So like I guess it has to depend and the type of engine and shit. Like so, this shit is very intricate, mad intricate. So basically, I feel like what we have to do here is find like the most prominent racing like championships, like the most prominent racing like clubs and stuff. So I feel like Formula One is definitely on there. Now hold on. So we have no several prominent racing championships. Formula One is recognized as the pinnacle of open wheel racing, while NASCAR is a premier stock car racing series. IndyCar, another prominent open wheel races and popular in the US in the realm of sports car racing, the FIA World Endurance Championship, and the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championships are major players. Additionally, Formula E, a championship for electrical single seater cars, has gained significant attractions. Other notable championships include MotoGP, the Grand Prix, the World Rally Championship, WRC, various feeder series of the FIA Formula 2 and Indy. So open wheel racing, Formula One, IndyCar Series, Super Formula, FIA Formula 2 Championship, ND NXT, stock car racing, NASCAR Cup Series, the premier stock car racing series in the United States, known for the its oval track and large fan base. Sports car racing, the FIA World Endurance Championship, the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car. 24 Hours of Le Mans, a legendary endurance race that is part of the Triple Crown Endurance Racing, alongside the 24 Hours Daytona and 12 Hours of Sebring. Other notable championships: Formula E, MotoGP, FIA World Rally Cross Championship, FIA World Rally Cross Championship, D1 Grand Prix, a drifting competition focused on skill and artistry of controlled slides. Oh, that shit sound lit. D1 Grand Prix. D1 Grand Prix. That sounds like it's about to be lit. Feel me? Now, hold on. And it also got like a little like definitions of the shit. So hold on. So Formula One, considered the highest class of singles seated auto racing and most prestigious motorsport championship globally. The IndyCar Series, a major open wheel series in the United States, known for its high speeds and oval track. I feel like I should do this like after the video. Yeah, we're gonna circle back to that. Hold on, let's finish this.
Very well attended when Michael Schumacher appeared on the scene, but was sometimes criticised as there were few grandstands in the forest section, and the races were often won by whomever had the most powerful engine. In 1982, a third chicane was added at the Ostkurve, and in 1989 a drag strip was built connecting the Südkurve and the Sachskurve. In 2002, Hermann Tilke was hired to do yet another redesign of the circuit, and added a long sweeping straight called the Parabolica, joining the two main straights with sharp hairpins, reducing the circuit to 2.8 miles or 4.6 kilometers in length. However, as well as this, in what can only be described as a hate crime against motorsport, he had the forest section completely torn up and replanted with sapling trees. More than 20 years on, its imprint in the forest is still clearly visible, with large clearings where the chicanes used to be, and a new memorial to Jim Clark was built at Turn 2 to replace the original one at the site of his death, now abandoned in the forest. Even in its somewhat emasculated form, the circuit still remained very popular, but growing debts meant it was absent from the Formula 1 calendar in 2007, and then began alternating with the Nürburgring, was not held in 2015 or 2017, and was then dropped after 2019. Notable races include Nelson Piquet and Eliseo Salazar's fistfight in 1982, Gerhard Berger's final win in 1997, Carnage in 2001, Fernando Alonso being faster than Felipe Massa in 2010, Vettel choking in 2018, and a wet weather thriller in 2019. It sits at the top of the list of circuits to return to the Formula 1 calendar, but is currently kept busy with DTM, GT cars, drag racing, FRECA, and Boss GP. The Red Bull Ring. The Red Bull Ring, originally named the Österreich Ring, or Austria Ring, was built in 1969 nestled away in the Austrian Alps in the southeastern state of Styria, near to the towns of Spielberg, Knittelfeld and Zeltweg, in a valley carved by the Mur River. The original layout was made up entirely of extremely fast corners, compounded by the track being just 10 metres wide and huge elevation changes due to being built on the side of a mountain. It began hosting the Austrian Grand Prix in 1970 as a permanent replacement for the now closed Zeltweg, barely a mile away, but following Mark Donoghue's fatal accident there in 1975, a chicane was added at Turn 1 in 1977 to help slow the cars down. In 1986, it was renamed the Steiermark-Österreich Ring, or Styria Austria Ring, and was then dropped from the calendar after 1987, mostly due to safety concerns, as the turbocharged cars were matching the average lap speeds at Silverstone, but on a much narrower circuit with little to no runoff. In 1995, Hermann Tilke drastically shortened and redesigned the circuit, tightening the corners up to slow the cars down and create more overtaking opportunities. As this was primarily funded by mobile phone provider A1, the circuit was renamed the A1 Ring, and resumed hosting the Austrian Grand Prix in 1997. It did so until the contract expired in 2003, after an especially scandalous 2002 race which saw Rubens Barrichello be ordered to give the lead and the win up to Ferrari teammate Michael Schumacher at the very last second. Following this, the circuit was sold to Dietrich Mateschitz, who renamed it the Red Bull Ring, but as the pit buildings and grandstands were demolished, it lay dormant for several years. It eventually reopened in 2011 and in 2014 began its third stint hosting the Austrian Grand Prix, which it will continue to do until at least 2030, and in 2020 and 2021 also hosted the Styrian Grand Prix as a double-header. In modern Formula One, the circuit has become well known for the presence of the Orange Army, there to support Max Verstappen, who has won at the circuit 5 times, and for its large number of track limits violations. Replacement of grass and gravel with runoff and very wide rumble strips at the fastest corners has made time penalties and time deletions comically common. From a spectator perspective, the circuit is fantastic, as it is set in stunning scenery, and the large elevation changes and relatively confined nature gives a near panoramic view of the circuit from grandstands from turns 1 to 4. As Red Bull's answer to Fiorano for Ferrari, it gets used for Red Bull exhibition events and driver coaching, and outside of Formula 1 is extremely active, hosting Formula 2, Formula 3, FRECA, MotoGP, DTM, and the Porsche Carrera Cup, among others. Circuit Paul Ricard. Paul Ricard is located on a plateau overlooking the village of Le Castellet in the département of Var in Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur in France. It was built in 1970 as the brainchild of French industrialist Paul Ricard, famous for his pastis brand. For the time, it was one of the safest and most modern circuits in the world. It featuring its own airstrip, and its close proximity to the French Riviera also made it ideal for testing in the winter months. The original design had 3 layouts, and the full circuit was 3.6 miles or 5.8 kilometers in length, and was dominated by the 1.1 mile or 1.8 kilometer long Mistral Straight. It was chosen as the 6th new venue for the French Grand Prix in 1971, and alternated with Charades and Dijon-Prenois until becoming the sole host in 1985. When the turbo era began, Paul Ricard began breaking speed records, and could see a top speed range of over 30 miles per hour or 50 kilometers per hour between the turbocharged and naturally aspirated cars. As such, there were several big accidents, and when Elio De Angelis was killed in a testing crash at the circuit in 1986, it was cut in half to 2.4 miles or 3.8 kilometers. Then, in 1991, the French Grand Prix moved to Magny-Cours. Paul Ricard was then used mostly for motorcycle events, most notably the 24-hour Bol d'Or, and after Paul Ricard's death in 1999, it was bought by Bernie Ecclestone for $11 million, $21 million in 2025 money. In 2018, the French Grand Prix returned there. By now, a chicane had been added in the middle of the Mistral Straight, and a series of seizure-inducing, highly abrasive runoff areas infused with tungsten had been built around the circuit that had the effect of both slowing the cars down and wrecking their tyres. The contract ran until 2022, though the 2020 race was cancelled due to COVID-19, but they were largely uneventful races.
Bro, where's the grip on these tires, my nigga? Shit looks ball as hell, man. Yo, I need to stop at the pit stop real quick, man. I see no grip on these tires, man. Unless it's just spinning too fast, cause what the fuck?
And the French Grand Prix remains off the calendar. Nivelles-Boulay. Nivelles-Boulay was located just north of the town of Nivelles and the village of Boulay in the Wallonia region of Belgium, 15 miles or 24 kilometers south of Brussels. It was built by John Hugenholtz in 1971 as a safe new alternative to the very dangerous Spa-Francorchamps, and began hosting the Belgian Grand Prix in 1972. However, it was immediately criticised for being bland and featureless, with no elevation change and huge runoff areas, and offering very little challenge, being only 2.3 miles or 3.7 kilometres in length. It hosted the race again in 1974, but then went bankrupt and now presented safety concerns due to the tarmac breaking up. It continued to host motorcycle races until closing in 1981. It sat derelict and deserted for 18 years and was used for illegal racing until being demolished in 1999 to make way for a business park. Most of the original layout, aside from turns 4 and 5 and the turn 7 hairpin, are still drivable, and in 2014, to mark 40 years since the last Grand Prix, a small revival was held there, using what roads were left. Alto de Romo José Carlos Paz.
Fucking sidewalk. Hold on. Back up.
A small revival was held there, using what roads were left.
Boom. We're gonna stop it right there because we're about halfway.